Welcome to Elizabeth's Stories. Today we follow May Delocroix, a devoted mother betrayed by her sons at her sister's will reading who reclaims her dignity, confronts their greed, and finds peace through self-empowerment. Subscribe and hit the bell for weekly videos uncovering heartfelt truths. Share your thoughts below. Let's start the stories. The air in the room was sharp, like a blade held just above the skin. It wasn't the cold of winter seeping through the tall, arched windows of the Winslow and Chambers Law Office, nor the faint hum of the radiator struggling against the November chill. It was the weight of eyes sharp, calculating, and unfamiliar pinned on me as I stood at the threshold, clutching the navy leather folder that had belonged to my sister Marlene. The folder wasn't just a collection of papers. It felt alive in my hands, pulsing with secrets I hadn't yet dared to speak aloud. I am May Delocroix, 62 years old, a widow, a mother, a sister. But in that moment, as my sons Randall and Trevor stood like sentinels before the chair meant for me, I felt like none of those things. I felt like a stranger in my own story. "You're not mentioned here," Randall said, his voice flat. His arms crossed over the tailored lines of his charcoal suit. His eyes, the same hazel as his father's, held no warmth, only a glint of certainty that cut deeper than any blade. Trevor, younger by 3 years, shifted beside him, his own suit slightly less pristine, a faint crease at the collar. "It's just for immediate family, Mom." He added his words softer, but no less barbed. His half-smile, the one he used when explaining things I'd never asked about, flickered and died under my gaze. Immediate family. The words echoed in my skull, each syllable a stone dropped into a still pond. I had carried them in my womb, raised them through sleepless nights, bandaged their scraped knees, and taught them how to face a world that didn't always bend to their will. And now here they stood, barring my way, as if I were an intruder at my own sister's will reading. The room itself seemed complicit in their betrayal. The oak table gleamed under the chandelier's muted glow, its surface reflecting the faces of distant cousins and unfamiliar faces who barely glanced up from their whispered conversations. The velvet curtains, heavy and blood-red, framed the windows like a stage set for a tragedy. A faint stain on the beige carpet coffee, perhaps, or something older caught my eye, grounding me in the absurdity of noticing such a detail when my world was unraveling. I tightened my grip on the folder, its leather cool against my palms. Inside were the originals, not copies documents Marlene and I had signed in a different lifetime, when trust was a currency we spent freely. I hadn't planned to wield them so soon, but the moment demanded it. I received a letter, I said, my voice quieter than I intended steady, despite the tremor in my chest. From Winslow and Chambers. This address, this date. I held their gaze, searching for a crack in their resolve, a flicker of the boys I'd raised. There was none. Randall scoffed, a sound that sliced through the room's murmur. They must have made a mistake. "We're handling the estate now. Aunt Marlene appointed us last fall. She didn't have children. You're not in this version." His words were precise, rehearsed, as if he'd practiced them in front of a mirror. Trevor stepped closer, his half-smile reappearing, the one that always preceded his attempts to smooth things over. "Mom, look, we can explain later. For now, please don't make a scene." A scene. As if I were the one orchestrating this betrayal. I looked down at the carpet again, the green flecks in the weave like tiny eyes watching me. The air grew heavier, as if the room itself held its breath, waiting for my next move. I felt a strange hum beneath my skin, a sensation I couldn't place, like the whisper of a memory that wasn't entirely mine. Marlene's voice, perhaps, or something older, urging me to stand firm. "I'm not here to make a scene." I said, each word deliberate, carved from the silence I'd held too long. I'm here because Marlene wanted me to be. The secretary behind the desk, a young woman with a nameplate reading K. Mendez shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes darted between me and my sons, her fingers hovering over a stack of papers. "You're not on the list," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she feared the weight of her own words. She would have wanted me here. I said not to her, not to my sons, but to the air itself, to the unseen presence that seemed to linger in the room's corners. I took a step forward, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor, a sound that felt louder than it should have. The folder in my hands grew warmer. Or perhaps it was my own resolve igniting. Randall opened his mouth to protest, but I didn't give him the chance. I reached into the folder, my fingers brushing against the crisp edges of the document I'd guarded for years. It wasn't just paper. It was a promise inked in Marlene's elegant script and my own steady hand. I handed it to Ms. Mendez, my eyes never leaving hers. "Please give this to Mir Harold. I believe it supersedes any amendments made last fall." She blinked, startled, then took the document with trembling hands. Randall started to speak, but Trevor grabbed his arm, his voice low and urgent. "Let's just wait." Ms. Mendez disappeared through a door at the far end of the room. The paper clutched like a relic. I stepped past my sons and sat in the chair they'd blocked. Neither moved to stop me. The folder rested on my lap, no longer a shield but a weapon, its weight grounding me in a truth they couldn't yet fathom. The room fell silent, save for the faint tick of a clock I couldn't see. Across the table, a cousin I hadn't seen in 2 decades. Edwin, with his thinning hair and tired eyes, gave me a faint nod. I returned it a silent acknowledgement of shared history, of losses we both understood. The other faces remained blurred strangers caught in their own small dramas, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. I hadn't planned to speak first. I'd imagined this moment differently, a solemn reading, a formal affair Marlene's wishes laid bare in a voice of authority. Not this petty gatekeeping, not this calculated exclusion. But as I sat there, the folder's warmth spreading through my hands, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet, but a spark of something ancient, something Marlene had always carried, a defiance that refused to bow. The door opened, and Mr. Harold stepped in. He was tall, gray-bearded, with a jacket that carried the faint scent of old books and dust. He held the document I'd given Ms. Mendez his fingers, tracing its edges with deliberate slowness, as if he could feel the weight of its secrets. His eyes found mine across the room, and for a moment I saw a flicker of recognition, as if he knew more than he should. "Mrs. Delacroix," he said, his voice low but resonant, cutting through the room's tension. "May I speak with you privately for a moment?" Randall bristled his chair, scraping against the floor. "We were told this was a closed session." Mr. Harold ignored him, his gaze steady on me. "This concerns joint filings from 2008. If you'll follow me." I rose my legs, steadier than I expected, and followed him down a narrow hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced men in outdated suits. The air grew cooler, the hum beneath my skin stronger, as if the walls themselves whispered secrets. His office was small, cluttered, smelling of cedar and thyme. There were no chairs, only a high counter where he laid the document flat. "This is unexpected," he said, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "You and Marlene executed a mutual will in 2008, witnessed, notarized, and filed in the county record. It predates the revision the boys submitted." I knotted my throat tight. She didn't trust anyone but me. He looked up, his eyes sharp but kind. "Legally, it overrides the later changes, unless revoked in your presence." Was it no? I said the word. A stone dropped into the silence. He nodded once, his fingers tapping the paper. Then you are the sole beneficiary. The entire estate house land accounts everything. The boys don't know. They suspect, but they don't know. A pause hung between us, heavy with unspoken questions. I felt the hum again, stronger now, like a thread connecting me to Marlene, to the promises we'd made in a room much like this one years ago. Would you like me to inform them? He asked. No, I said, my voice firm. Let them hear it during the reading with everyone else. He studied me, his eyes searching for something I wasn't sure I possessed. Then, as he closed the file with a soft thud, you'll stay for the reading. Yes, I said, now that I've been allowed to sit. We returned to the room, the air thicker, now charged with anticipation. Randall and Trevor didn't look at me, but I saw their postures shift, shoulders tensing, hands fidgeting. They knew something had changed, though they couldn't name it. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one waiting to be led. I was the one holding the truth. The reading began. Mr. Harold's voice steady as he outlined Marlene's estate, the house on Maple Street with its sagging porch and dogwood tree. The land she'd bought impulsively in '92, now worth a small fortune, the accounts she'd guarded with a miser's caution. The room listened rapt as he reached the critical clause. In accordance with the mutual will executed on June 14th, 2008, he said all assets are bequeathed to May Delacroix, sole beneficiary, as agreed upon by Marlene Delacroix in the presence of witnesses. A gasp rippled through the room, soft but electric. Randall's head snapped up, his eyes wide, disbelieving. Trevor stared at his hands, his knuckles white. The cousins murmured their whispers, a chorus of shock and curiosity. I sat still, the folder on my lap. Its warmth now a steady pulse, as if Marlene herself were beside me, nodding in approval. Randall stood his chair, scraping loudly. That's impossible. There's a newer will. We filed it last fall. Mr. Harold didn't flinch. The 2008 will is irrevocable without joint consent. No such consent was recorded. The later document is null. The word null landed like a gavel. Randall's face flushed, his jaw tight, but he said nothing. Trevor glanced at me, his eyes searching, but I didn't meet his gaze. I looked instead at the stain on the carpet, its edges blurred like a memory I couldn't quite grasp. The reading continued, but the words faded into the background. My mind wandered to the folder, to the night Marlene and I had signed those papers. We'd sat in her kitchen, the air thick with the scent of lavender tea, her laughter bright, despite the shadow of illness creeping in. She'd pressed a key into my hand, a small brass thing with a crescent moon etched into its surface. For the box, she'd said, her eyes glinting with mischief, "You'll know when to use it." I hadn't understood then, but now, as the room buzzed with tension, I felt the weight of that key in my pocket. It wasn't just for a box of papers. It was for something more, something Marlene had hidden, something my sons hadn't anticipated. The hum beneath my skin grew stronger, a whisper of power I didn't yet understand. As Mr. Harold concluded, the room emptied slowly, relatives drifting out with murmured condolences and sidelong glances. Randall lingered, his eyes fixed on me, a storm brewing behind them. Trevor followed him out, his shoulders slumped, his silence louder than words. I stayed in my chair, the folder still on my lap. The key, a quiet promise in my pocket. The room felt different now, as if the air itself had shifted, carrying a scent I couldn't place, lavender perhaps, or something older, wilder. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew this Marlene had left me more than an estate. She'd left me a mystery one I was only beginning to unravel. And I would unravel it no matter what my sons believed they could take from me. The house was too quiet when I returned from the will, reading the kind of quiet that clings to the walls like damp moss. I hung my coat on the rack, its brass hooks worn smooth from years of use, and kicked off my shoes. The kitchen light flickered a soft pulse that had annoyed me for months, but now felt like a heartbeat, a reminder that this house still lived, even if it felt hollow. I set the navy folder on the counter, its leather surface catching the dim glow, and beside it the brass key with the crescent moon etching warm against my palm, as if it had absorbed the heat of my resolve. I boiled water for tea, though my stomach was too knotted to drink. Habit, I suppose. There was a time when this kitchen rang with voices Randall and Trevor bickering over who got the last of the cereal, Marlene's laughter spilling from the doorway like sunlight, my husband Derek clinking his mug against mine just to see me smile. That was another life, one that felt like a dream I'd borrowed from someone else. I sat at the table, the folder untouched, and let my mind drift to those years, to the moments that had shaped me into the woman who'd just faced her son's betrayal without flinching. The hum I had felt in the law office lingered beneath my skin, faint but persistent, like a melody I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just grief or anger. It was something older, something tied to Marlene, to the secrets she'd left me to uncover. The early years, a tapestry of love and loss. I was born 11 months after Marlene, close enough that people called us Irish twins. We grew up in a small house on the edge of town, its walls papered with faded roses, its floors creaking under the weight of our childhood. Marlene was a spark, her red ribbons flashing in her hair, her voice loud with opinions no one expected from a girl her age. I was the quiet one, always reading, always watching, my nose buried in books or my eyes tracing the patterns of the world around me. We shared a bedroom until we were 16, a cramped space with 2 narrow beds and a window that never quite closed. Marlene taught me how to fake a headache to skip school, how to sneak pie from the fridge without leaving crumbs, how to lie with a straight face when caught. I taught her how to budget her allowance, how to write thank you letters that sounded sincere, how to keep secrets without cracking under pressure. We were 2 sides of a coin, inseparable, unbreakable. Our parents died when I was 19, Marlene 18, in a car crash on the interstate a week before my birthday. The news came like a thunderclap, sharp and final. We were alone, 2 girls in a house that no longer felt like home. We sold it within a year, splitting the modest sum to rent a small apartment. We took jobs, me at a library, Marlene at a local radio station, and pieced together a life from the fragments of our loss. Through it all, we had each other a compass when the world offered none. I met Derek at the library of all places. He was fixing the heating unit, his hands smudged with grease, his smile easy and warm. "Your voice sounds like music when you read to the kids," he said, and I laughed, telling him he was trying too hard. "Trying's half the battle," he replied. And a year later, I married him in a simple ceremony under a dogwood tree Marlene had planted in our backyard. She'd chosen it, she said, because it was delicate but defiant, blooming even after the harshest winters. Marlene never married, never want to. "I've got enough family to manage," she'd say, her eyes glinting with mischief. She lived a life that refused to be contained, traveling to Greece, Canada, Japan, teaching English, managing an art gallery, spinning stories on the radio. She'd return home for Christmas or my birthday always with something odd. A stone shaped like a heart, an apron embroidered with frogs, a jar of pickled onions from a Dublin market. Randall and Trevor adored her when they were young, shouting Aunt Maher and running to her at the door. She'd twirl them around, let them stay up late, feed them candy before dinner. Derek would wink at me and say, "She's not here to raise them. She's here to remind them life can be loud." The turning point. Derek's death and the drift. Derek died 22 years ago, just after the new year. Heart failure, sudden and merciless. I found him in the garage, his tools scattered around him, his face peaceful in a way that broke me. I sat on the porch in my robe, snow falling into my slippers, the phone dangling from my hand as the ambulance lights flashed in the distance. He was gone before they arrived. Randall was 23, Trevor barely 20. They were devastated for a week, their grief raw and loud. Then it turned practical, as grief often does. Who gets the car? Who pays the mortgage? Who handles the insurance? They stepped into adulthood like stepping onto a moving train, fast, loud, careless. I didn't mind at first. I was proud of them. Randall got into real estate, his charm opening doors, his deals closing within 2 years. Trevor stayed local, opening a garage with a high school friend, saying he liked working with his hands. I helped them both, always. When Randall's first investment tanked, I wrote him a check. When Trevor's partner vanished with their business funds, I dipped into my pension. No questions, just love. That's what mothers do. But love, I learned, can blind you. Randall grew sharper, his charm a polished blade he wielded to get what he wanted. Trevor grew quieter, his gratitude fading into silence. They stopped coming to Sunday dinners, stopped calling unless they needed something. I told myself they were busy building their lives. But deep down, I felt the shift, the tilt from mother to means. The hum beneath my skin pulsed faintly as I sat at the kitchen table, the tea gone cold. I reached for the folder, my fingers brushing the key. It was heavier than it should have been, its crescent moon etching, catching the light like a winking eye. Marlene had given it to me the night we signed the will. Her voice low, her words cryptic. Keep it close, May. It's not just for the papers. It's for when you need to remember who you are. I hadn't understood then, but the memory stirred something now, a thread of mystery I couldn't yet pull. I set the key aside and opened the folder, the documents crisp and heavy with intent. The will was there, our signatures side by side. But there was something else, a single page in Marlene's handwriting tucked into a hidden pocket I hadn't noticed before. The ink was faded, the words uneven, as if written in a hurry. May, if you're reading this, it's because they've tried to take what's ours. Don't let them. The box isn't just a box. Find it. Open it. Trust yourself. The box, I'd assumed she meant the fireproof safe where I'd kept the folder, but the note suggested something more. My heart quickened, the hum growing stronger, a vibration that seemed to echo from the walls themselves. I glanced around the kitchen, half expecting to see Marlene's shadow in the doorway, her red ribbons flashing in the dim light. Marlene's decline, a sister's keeper. When Marlene started getting sick, it wasn't sudden. It crept in like fog, softening the edges of her sharp mind. Her letters, once witty and sprawling, grew repetitive, then stopped altogether. She'd call me forgetting what she'd said 5 minutes earlier, her voice bright but brittle. I found her a doctor, drove her to every appointment, sat with her through tests that confirmed what I'd feared: mild cognitive decline, then early Alzheimer's. She hated the idea of assisted living. I'm not a plant to be potted, she'd said, her eyes fierce despite the tremor in her hands. So I turned the guest room into her space with her favorite quilt and a shelf for her odd trinkets. I cared for her as I'd cared for my sons, with a devotion that didn't ask for thanks. Randall and Trevor didn't help. She's not our responsibility, Trevor said once when I asked him to pick up her prescriptions. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Marlene knew even as her mind frayed. They'll come when I'm gone, she said one day, her voice soft as she sat in her armchair, her eyes fixed on the dogwood tree outside. Like pigeons at a park bench pecking for scraps. It wasn't bitterness, just truth, spoken with the clarity of someone who'd seen the world's edges. One night, a year after she moved in, she pulled me to the kitchen table, her hands steady despite the fog in her eyes. "We need to write our wills," she said. "People change when money's on the table. Let's not give them the chance." We met with a lawyer, Mr. Harold's predecessor, and signed a mutual will naming each other's sole beneficiary. It felt like a ceremony, a pact sealed in ink and trust. I thought it was more symbolic than necessary, but Marlene's insistence carried a weight I couldn't ignore. As her illness progressed, she faded in pieces. She forgot how to use the microwave, then her keys, then my name, introducing me as her neighbor to visitors. I never corrected her. What was the point? But there were moments when her eyes would spark and she'd say, "May if I ever forget who I am, remind me who you are." I promised I would, and I did. I cared for her until the end. There were nights she wandered outside, and I'd chase her barefoot down the sidewalk, her laughter trailing like a ghost. There were mornings I found cereal in the freezer milk in the cupboard, but I never lost patience because love isn't just joy. It's holding the line when someone's drifting. The day before she died, she squeezed my hand twice, once for hello, once for goodbye. She passed in her sleep peaceful on a Thursday morning. I sat with her for 2 hours, not out of denial, but respect. Some people deserve a soft goodbye. The aftermath. A shifting family. After Marlene's death, the house grew quieter. The silence no longer comforting but expectant, like the pause before a storm. The funeral was small, just family and a few neighbors. Randall gave a speech polished and rehearsed his voice, carrying the cadence of a salesman. Trevor stood stiffly, hands in pockets, his eyes distant. Neither had visited Marlene more than twice in her final year, but after the service they changed. Randall called more often, his questions circling the estate. Trevor showed up unannounced, offering to help. I let them not because I trusted them, but because I wanted to see how far they'd go. The letter from Winslow and Chambers arrived a week later, addressed to me in Marlene's elegant script. I didn't tell my sons. I overheard Randall on the phone one day, his voice low and sharp. "She doesn't need to be there. We've got the final draft. It's all lined up." I went upstairs, opened the safe, and took out the Navy folder. The key was there, too, its crescent moon gleaming like a warning. Everything they thought was theirs had been signed away years ago. But part of me hoped I was wrong, that their betrayal was carelessness, not cruelty. That hope died in the law office when they blocked my chair, their faces hard with certainty. I looked at the folder now, the hidden note burning in my mind. The box isn't just a box. Find it. Open it. Trust yourself. I stood, the hum beneath my skin now a steady pulse, and walked to the attic. The stairs creaked under my weight, the air growing thick with dust and memory. Marlene's things were there packed in crates after her death. I found a small wooden box, no bigger than a book, its surface carved with crescent moons and vines. The key fit perfectly, but when I turned it, the lock didn't click. Instead, a faint glow pulsed from the seams, and the hum in my chest surged sharp and alive. I didn't open it, not yet. Something told me the time wasn't right, that Marlene's secrets required more than courage, they required readiness. I tucked the box under my arm and returned to the kitchen, the folder and key beside it. The house was still quiet, but it wasn't empty. It held echoes of Marlene, of Derek, of the woman I'd been, and the one I was becoming. The spark of awakening. As I sat with my cold tea, the note's words looped in my mind. Trust yourself. I'd spent years trusting others, Derek's steadiness, my son's potential, Marlene's fire. But myself, I'd buried that trust under layers of duty, of giving, of silence. The hum beneath my skin felt like a call, not just from Marlene, but from the part of me I'd forgotten. I thought of the dogwood tree outside, its pale pink blossoms defiant against the November chill. Marlene had planted it in '95, saying it reminded her of us, delicate but unyielding. I wondered now if she'd known something I hadn't, if the tree, the key, the box were pieces of a puzzle she'd left me to solve. The betrayal of my sons wasn't just a wound. It was a mirror showing me the woman I'd let myself become, someone who nodded, who gave, who stepped back. But the folder, the key, the box, they were reminders of who I could be. The hum grew stronger, a melody now weaving through my thoughts. It wasn't just Marlene's voice. It was mine, waking up. I didn't know what the box held, or why the key glowed, or what secrets Marlene had hidden. But I knew this. I would find out. And when I did, I'd face my sons not as their mother, but as May Delocqua, keeper of promises, guardian of truths, and a woman who would no longer be erased. The morning after the will reading, I woke to a house that felt different. Not quieter, but sharper, as if the edges of the world had been honed overnight. The navy folder lay on the kitchen table, its leather surface catching the dawn's pale light, and beside it, the brass key, with its crescent moon etching, seemed to hum faintly a vibration I felt in my bones. The wooden box I'd found in the attic sat nearby, its carved vines and moons untouched, unopened. I hadn't dared turn the key again, not after the glow I'd seen pulsing from its seams, a light that felt alive, expectant. I made tea, the ritual grounding me, though the steam rising from the cup seemed to curl with a purpose, as if whispering secrets I wasn't yet ready to hear. The note from Marlene. Tucked back into the folder's hidden pocket, burned in my mind. The box isn't just a box. Find it, open it, trust yourself. Her words were a riddle, a challenge, and I felt the weight of them pressing against the walls of my heart. I was May Delacroix, 62, a widow, a mother, a sister. But I was also something more, something I'd buried under years of giving, of softening my edges to fit the spaces others carved for me. The hum beneath my skin, the one that had started in the law office and grown stronger in the attic, was no longer a whisper. It was a call, and I was beginning to answer. The spark of clarity. The kitchen was still save for the flicker of the overhead light, a pulse that matched the rhythm in my chest. I sat with the folder, my fingers tracing the edges of Marlene's note. My son's betrayal. Randall's cold certainty, Trevor's hesitant complicity had cracked something open in me, not just pain, but a clarity I hadn't known I'd lost. I'd spent decades being the mother who gave the sister who cared, the wife who steadied. But who was I when this giving stopped? When the caring was met with indifference, when the steadiness was taken for granted. The key gleamed on the table, its crescent moon catching the light like a winking eye. I picked it up, its weight heavier than it should have been, and felt the hum surge, a warmth spreading from my palm to my chest. It wasn't just a key. It was a promise, a piece of Marlene's fire that she'd left for me to claim. I thought of her words spoken years ago in this very kitchen. People change when money's on the table. Let's not give them the chance. We'd signed the mutual will that night, a pact to protect each other, but now I wondered if she'd meant more than the estate. The box, the key, the glow, there was something else, something my sons hadn't anticipated. I stood the chair scraping softly against the linoleum and carried the box to the living room. The dogwood tree outside the window swayed in the morning breeze, its pale pink blossoms a silent defiance against the gray November sky. Marlene had planted it in '95, saying it reminded her of us, delicate but unyielding. I set the box on the coffee table, its carved surface seeming to shimmer faintly as if it knew I was watching. I didn't open it. Not yet. The hum told me to wait, to prepare to trust the timing of whatever Marlene had left behind. Instead, I opened the folder and reread the will, our signatures side by side, the ink as firm as the day we'd signed it. The document was ironclad, Mr. Harold had said, but I knew Randall wouldn't accept it. He'd always been the one to bend the world to his will, his charm a tool as sharp as any blade. Trevor was different, softer, but his silence at the reading had cut just as deep. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was awake, and that was more dangerous. I picked up the phone and dialed Winslow and Chambers. "This is May Delacroix," I said when Dana, the receptionist, answered. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Harold, please." "One moment, Mrs. Delacroix," she replied, her voice warm but cautious, as if she sensed the storm brewing. Harold picked up on the third ring. "May, I was just about to call you. I've reviewed the documentation again. It's solid. Your claim takes precedence. I want to formalize the transfer," I said, my voice steady, the hum in my chest a quiet ally. "All of it, titles, accounts, everything. And I want protections in place." He paused, the silence heavy with understanding. "Protections, yes. Legal locks. I don't want Randall or Trevor accessing a cent of this estate, not through proxy, not through power of attorney, not through charm." I paused, the word sharp on my tongue, especially not through charm. Harold cleared his throat, a sound that carried both respect and curiosity. "We can draft a restriction clause. You're within your rights. The property titles will take a few weeks, but we can move on the accounts immediately." "Good," I said. "There's too much liquid cash sitting vulnerable." "Understood." He replied, his pen scratching faintly in the background. "Anything else?" I hesitated, the hum pulsing stronger, as if urging me forward. "I want to open a trust, a living trust for someone who still treats me like a human being." "Do you have a beneficiary in mind?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Claire Whitlow," I said. "My cousin's granddaughter. She's 26, works nights at the city library. Visits me every 2 weeks, never asks for a dime." Harold's tone softened, a smile audible in his words. "That's generous of you." "No." I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "It's appropriate." We worked in silence for a time, his questions precise, my answers clear. I signed where needed, read every clause, asked questions without apology. The hum in my chest grew steadier, a rhythm that felt like my own heartbeat reclaimed. When we finished, I added one final request. "One more thing," I said, my fingers brushing the key on the table. "If either of my sons contests these arrangements after my passing, I want them disinherited completely." Harold didn't flinch. "A no contest clause." "Yes." I said the word avow. He jotted it down without comment, and I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not joy, but clarity, like the quiet after storm, when the air is charged, but the sky is open. I left his office with a stack of paperwork and the box tucked under my arm, its weight a reminder of the mystery I'd yet to unravel, the box and its secrets, back home. I placed the box on the mantel, its carved moons glowing faintly in the afternoon light. The hum was constant now, a melody that seemed to weave through the house, threading itself into the creak of the floorboards, the rustle of the curtains. I didn't open it, though. Every instinct urged me to. Something told me I needed to understand more about Marlene, about myself, before I turned the key again. I thought of the night we'd signed the will, Marlene's laughter bright, despite the shadow of her illness. She'd pressed the key into my hand, her fingers warm, her eyes glinting with a secret she hadn't shared. For the box, she'd said, but there was a weight to her words, a promise of something beyond paper and ink. I'd assumed she meant the safe, But the wooden box in the attic with its glowing seams and carved vines told a different story. I walked to the attic again, the stairs groaning under my weight, the air thick with dust and memory. Marlene's crates were still there, untouched since her death. I sifted through them, my fingers brushing faded postcards, a silk scarf from Japan, a journal with pages curled at the edges. The journal caught my attention, its cover embossed with a crescent moon the same as the key. I opened it, my heart quickening as I recognized Marlene's handwriting, sharp and elegant, even in her final years. The entries were sporadic, written in bursts of clarity between the fog of her illness. One dated 3 years ago stopped me cold. May thinks I'm fading, but I see more than she knows. The box holds our truth, not just the will. It's tied to us, to the women we've always been. If they try to take what's ours, she'll need it. She'll need to remember. The words sent a shiver through me, the hum surging like a tide. What was the box? What truth did it hold? I flipped through more pages, finding fragments of Marlene's thoughts, references to the light, to keeping it safe, to a promise we'd made as girls under the dogwood tree. I didn't remember the promise not clearly, but the hum seemed to pull at the edges of my memory, urging me to dig deeper. I carried the journal downstairs, my mind racing. The box wasn't just a keepsake. It was a piece of Marlene's legacy, a secret she'd guarded even as her mind slipped. I sat on the couch, the journal open on my lap, and let the memories flood back. The cost of giving my life had been a series of sacrifices, each one a brick in the wall I'd built around my own desires. When Derek died, I'd poured myself into raising Randall and Trevor, believing love meant giving without question. I'd written checks when their dreams faltered, dipped into my pension to keep them afloat, cleaned their messes when they couldn't. I'd been proud once of their resilience, of the men they were becoming. But pride blinded me to the truth they'd learned to take, not to give. When Marlene moved in, I'd given again, turning my home into hers, my days into her care. Randall had called it a burden. Trevor had called it unnecessary. But I'd seen it as love. Marlene had seen it too. "You're my anchor, May," she'd said once, her hand squeezing mine as we sat by the fire. Don't let them pull you under. I hadn't understood then, but I did now. The will reading wasn't just about money. It was about power, about who got to decide my place in the world. Randall and Trevor had assumed I'd step back as I always had. But the hum, the key, the box, they were waking me up, reminding me of the girl who'd once stood shoulder to shoulder with Marlene, unafraid. I thought of Claire, the cousin's granddaughter, who visited every 2 weeks with a smile and a tin of lemon squares. She never asked for anything, never expected anything, but she gave her time, her laughter, her presence. She was 26 with freckles across her nose and a quiet kindness that reminded me of Marlene's younger days. I'd chosen her for the trust, not because she was blood, but because she was family in the truest sense. The hum seemed to agree, pulsing softly when I thought of her. Taking action. The next morning, I drove to the bank, the folder and box in the passenger seat. The hum was a constant companion, now a melody that seemed to guide my steps. Dana. The young woman behind the desk greeted me with a respect I wasn't used to, her voice calling me Mrs. Delacroix, as if it carried weight. Harold had called ahead, paving the way. "I have the paperwork here," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. "It authorizes the transfer of all account holdings into your name, fully separated from the previous estate structure." I nodded, signing each page with a steady hand. The hum pulsed in time with my pen as if affirming every stroke. And the trust I asked. "It's being set up as we speak," Dana replied. "The funds will remain secure until you assign dispersal instructions. If anyone tries to access the accounts, I want to be notified immediately. I said they won't, she assured me, her smile genuine. But you'll be the first to know. I left the bank with a sense of purpose, the folder under my arm, the box in my bag. The sidewalk was warm under my shoes, the air sharp with the promise of winter. I passed two young men arguing on a corner, their voices sharp, their hands flying. Once I might have crossed the street, avoiding their anger. Today I walked past, unflinching, the hum a shield around me. Back home, I set the box on the mantel again, its glow fainter now, as if waiting for the right moment. I opened the journal, reading more of Marlene's entries. One, written just months before her death, caught my breath. The box is our strength, May. It's not just ours, it's hers too, the women before us. If you open it, you'll see. But only when you're ready. Hers, the women before us. The words stirred something deep, a memory I couldn't grasp. I thought of our mother, her quiet strength, her stories of our grandmother, a woman who'd walked through fire to protect her family. Was the box tied to them? To some legacy I'd never known, I called Claire that afternoon, her voice bright on the other end. Aunt May, I was just thinking of you. I baked lemon squares extra zest like you like. Can I come by tomorrow? Of course, I said, the hum softening at the sound of her voice. I'd like that. I didn't tell her about the trust, not yet. I wanted to see her face, to give her the news in person, to see the spark in her eyes. The hum seemed to approve, a gentle pulse that felt like Marlene's laughter. The plan takes shape. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, a notepad before me. The hum was a steady rhythm, now guiding my thoughts. I wrote 3 names, Harold, Claire, and after a moment's hesitation, Marlene. The plan wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, about ensuring no one ever mistook my silence for weakness again. I didn't tell anyone I was meeting Harold the next day. Let Randall think I was still reeling. Let Trevor believe I was waiting for their apologies. Let them imagine me curled up with old photo albums, whispering their names through tears. That was the May they knew, the one they'd counted on to bend. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Harold greeted me at his office, his eyes sharp with curiosity. You didn't need an appointment, May, but I'm glad you came. I want everything locked down, I said, sitting without waiting to be invited. Titles, assets, accounts, and I want the trust for Claire finalized. She deserves to breathe, to live without struggle. He nodded, pulling out forms. We'll update the titles to reflect sole ownership. The trust can be structured to disperse funds as you see fit, monthly lump sum, whatever you prefer. A portion of the estate, I said. Enough to set her free, but not so much it changes who she is. He smiled, a rare softness in his weathered face. You've thought this through. I've had years to think, I said, the hum pulsing in agreement. We worked for hours drafting clauses, signing papers, sealing the estate against my son's reach. I asked about the no contest clause again, ensuring it was ironclad. If they fight this after I'm gone, I said, they get nothing. It's done, Harold said, his pen pausing. You're sure? I thought of Randall's cold eyes, Trevor's hesitant smile, the chair they'd blocked. I'm sure. As I left, the box in my bag felt heavier, the hum stronger. I drove the Laneo way home past the elementary school where I'd taught for 30 years. The playground, empty, the swings swaying in the breeze. I passed the park bench where Randall had learned to ride a bike, Trevor clinging to my hand. Those memories didn't hurt anymore. They were truths, pieces of a life I'd lived fully, even if others hadn't seen it. The mystery deepens. At home, the answering machine blinked. 2 messages. I pressed play, the hum quieting as if listening. The first was Trevor, his voice low, strained. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Hope you're okay. Randall and I were talking. Maybe we should sit down, clear the air. The second was Randall, his tone smooth practiced. Mother, there's been some confusion with the will, possibly a clerical issue. We'd appreciate it if you could forward any documents you brought to the meeting. For transparency. Transparency. I almost laughed. It was the word people used when they wanted to see through you, not with you. I deleted both messages, the hum surging in approval. I sat at the table and wrote 2 letters, one to each son, short and clear. I received your messages. I'm not discussing the estate. All matters are handled through my attorney. Direct questions to him. Mother, no warmth, no apologies. They'd get the message. I wasn't angry. I was awake, and that was enough. The box called to me, its glow brighter now, pulsing in time with the hum. I carried it to the living room, the journal beside it. Another entry caught my eye, written in Marlene's final months. The box is a door, May. Not to a place, but to you, to us. When you're ready, it'll open. But you have to choose it. A door. The words sent a chill through me, the hum rising to a crescendo. I touched the key, its crescent moon warm against my skin. I wanted to open the box to see what Marlene had hidden, but something held me back, not fear, but respect. This wasn't just about me, it was about her, about the women before us, about a legacy I was only beginning to understand. I thought of Claire again, her lemon squares, her quiet presence. I thought of the dogwood tree, its blossoms defiant against the cold. I thought of Marlene, her laughter, her fire, her secrets. And I knew with a certainty that felt like the hum itself that I was ready not just to open the box, but to claim the life I had let others define for too long. The house was quiet the morning after I left Harold's office, but it was a different kind of quiet, not the heavy silence of absence, but the expectant hush of a stage before the curtain rises. The navy folder sat on the kitchen table, its leather surface catching the morning light, and beside it, the wooden box with its carved crescent moons and vines pulsed faintly as if alive with secrets. The brass key etched with a single crescent moon rested in my pocket, its warmth a constant reminder of Marlene's words. The box isn't just a box. Find it. Open it. Trust yourself. I sipped my tea, the steam curling like a question mark, and felt the hum beneath my skin steady now, a melody that seemed to weave through the walls of the house. It wasn't just Marlene's presence. It was mine, awakening, growing stronger with every decision I'd made to protect her legacy. The trust for Claire, the legal locks on the estate, the no contest clause. They were my first steps toward reclaiming the woman I'd buried under years of giving. But I knew the real test was coming. Randall and Trevor wouldn't let the will reading pass without a fight, and I was ready not with anger, but with clarity. The answering machine blinked 2 red lights pulsing like eyes in the dim kitchen. I pressed play, the hum softening as if listening. Trevor's voice came first, low and hesitant. The boy I'd raised, flickering beneath the man he'd become. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Hope you're okay. Randall and I were talking. Maybe we should sit down, clear the air. Randall's message followed his tone, smooth-polished the voice of a man used to getting his way. Mother, there's been some confusion with the will, possibly a clerical issue. We'd appreciate it if you could forward any documents you brought to the meeting. For transparency, transparency. The word was a blade sharp and cold, cloaked in courtesy. I knew what it meant. They wanted to see through me to find a crack in the armor I'd built. I deleted both messages, the hum surging in approval, a vibration that felt like Marlene's laughter. I sat at the table, a notepad before me, and wrote 2 letters, one to each son, my hand steady, my words clear. I received your messages. I'm not discussing the estate. All matters are handled through my attorney. Direct questions to him. Mother, no warmth, no apologies. They'd get the message, but I knew they wouldn't stop. Randall, with his calculated charm, would push harder. Trevor, with his quiet guilt, might waver, but he'd follow until he found his spine. The hum pulsed in my chest, a reminder that I wasn't the one waiting anymore. I was the one setting the terms. Randall's visit, a dance of words. The doorbell rang at 9:07 the next morning, sharp and insistent, cutting through the quiet like a warning. I was still in my robe, coffee in hand, the box on the mantel glowing faintly in the corner of my eye. Through the window, I saw Randall's silver car parked haphazardly at the curb, a detail that spoke of impatience of a man who believed the world should move on his schedule. I didn't answer right away. Let him wait. The second ring came faster, sharper, and I felt the hum stir, a quiet encouragement. I opened the door, my face calm, my eyes meeting his. Randall stood there. No suit this time, just a windbreaker and jeans, but his smile was the same one he'd worn every Christmas since Derek died. Bright, practiced, never reaching his eyes. "Hi, Mom," he said, as if we hadn't faced each other across a lawyer's desk 2 days ago, as if he hadn't barred me from my sister's will reading. I raised an eyebrow, the hum, a steady pulse in my chest. At 9:00 a.m. on a Saturday, he laughed a hollow sound and stepped forward as if expecting me to move aside. I didn't. "May I come in?" he asked, his tone lighter than it should have been. I hesitated, not out of fear, but because I wanted to see how far he'd go. Then I stepped aside, not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to know what he'd say next. He walked in his eyes, scanning the living room as if something had shifted, though he couldn't name what. The box on the mantel pulsed faintly, and I wondered if he felt it, if he sensed the weight of what he couldn't control. He sat on the edge of the armchair, his fingers laced, his posture too formal for a casual visit. I didn't offer coffee. The hum grew stronger, a melody that seemed to sharpen my senses to make every word he spoke transparent. I wanted to talk. He began, his voice smooth, rehearsed. "There seems to have been some miscommunication with Marlene's documents. Trevor and I were blindsided." "Were you?" I asked, my voice soft but sharp, the hum a quiet ally. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Well, yes. No one told us there was a prior will one that overrides the new one." "Because you didn't ask," I said. Leaning back in my chair, my hands folded in my lap. You assumed. You assumed she left it all to you, that I'd sit quietly nodding along like I always did." He blinked, caught off guard. "I wouldn't put it that way." "No," I said, my voice steady, the hum a low thrum. "You wouldn't. But I would, and I just did." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with things neither of us said. The box on the mantel pulsed again, a faint glow that seemed to cast shadows across Randall's face. He leaned forward, his voice taking on that persuasive lilt I'd heard too many times. "Mom, we're family. We should be on the same page here. We can fix this, find a solution." I almost laughed, not out of amusement, but because the hum seemed to mock his words, its melody sharp and clear. "You're very good at what you do, Randall," I said, "selling people things." "I'm not trying to sell you," he said, his jaw tightening. "You sold me once." I interrupted, my voice cutting through his. "When you convinced me to sign over the house after Derek died. For taxes, you said. Simpler that way." He shut his mouth, his eyes dropping to the floor. The hum surged, a wave of clarity washing over me. I thought of the day I'd signed those papers trusting Randall because he was my son, because I believed love meant giving him the benefit of the doubt. 2 years later, I'd had to beg him not to refinance the house under his name. He'd called me dramatic, but I'd felt the shift, then the tilt from mother to obstacle. I'm not angry, I said, my voice calm, but unyielding. That's not what this is. I'm done. I've made arrangements. Everything is handled legally, and if you try to challenge it, you'll be disinherited from anything I still control. He looked up, his eyes wide, disbelieving. You're really going to cut us out? I'm going to stop rewarding neglect. I said, the hum, a steady pulse, a reminder of the woman I was becoming. He sat back, his hands unlacing his face, a mask of calculation. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. The box on the mantel glowed brighter, its light casting a faint crescent shadow across the room, as if Marlene herself were watching, nodding in approval. He stood, his movements sharp, and walked to the door. This isn't over, he said, his voice low, a threat wrapped in calm. It is for me, I said, and closed the door behind him. The hum softened, a gentle acknowledgement of the line I'd drawn. Trevor's visit. A crack in the armor. 2 days later, the porch creaked under hesitant footsteps, and I knew it was Trevor before I saw him through the curtain. He stood there, shifting from foot to foot, his oil-stained jacket and jeans, a stark contrast to Randall's polished facade. The hum quieted, as if curious, as I watched him for a full minute before opening the door. Hey, Ma, he said, his voice soft, almost boyish, a nickname he hadn't used in years. His eyes, the same hazel as his father's, held a flicker of guilt, a crack in the armor he'd worn at the will reading. You here for a chat, or do you need something fixed? I asked, my tone light but pointed, the hum a gentle pulse in my chest. He scratched his neck, his smile sheepish. Maybe both. I stepped aside, and he walked in, taking off his boots without me asking a detail Randall had forgotten. He sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where he'd once sat broke and silent, letting me clean up his messes. I made tea, old habits die hard, and set a cup before him. The box on the mantel pulsed faintly, its glow soft but steady, as if watching. We sat in silence while the tea steeped, the hum a quiet melody between us. You know, he said finally, his voice low, I didn't know about the old will. Randall handled everything with the lawyers. I just trusted him. I stirred my tea, the spoon clinking softly against the cup. You always did. Guess I shouldn't have. He flinched, his eyes dropping to the table. He looked tired, older than I remembered, the boyish mouth still there, but shadowed by years. The hum pulsed, urging me to listen, to see the truth beneath his words. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. I don't want money, Ma. That's not why I'm here. This is everything you loaned me. All the numbers. I made a list. I know I can't pay it back all at once, but I want to. I paused, the hum softening, curious. I opened the envelope, the paper inside, neatly folded, the numbers precise. Every loan, every dollar, down to the $50 I'd given him for a tow truck 6 years ago. You kept track, I said, my voice steady but surprised. He nodded, his eyes meeting mine. Always meant to make it right. I just didn't know how to say it. And now you do, I said, the hum a gentle encouragement. I guess watching Randall scramble over something that wasn't his made me think he said, his voice quieter now. I was angry at the reading, at you, at Marlene, at everything. But I wasn't surprised. Not really. Why not? I asked. Leaning forward, the hum sharp and clear. Because you're not stupid, Ma, he said, his eyes steady for the first time. You were never stupid. I think we just counted on you acting like you were. The words landed like stones, heavy but true. The hum surged, a wave of clarity washing over me. He wasn't wrong. They hadn't believed I didn't know better. They'd believed I'd never speak up even if I did. I looked at him, The boy who'd once clung to my hand now, a man struggling to find his way back. "I want to earn back your trust," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then don't fight the will." I said, my voice firm, but not unkind. "Don't hire lawyers. Don't let Randall talk you into anything. Just leave it. Let it be what it is." He nodded slowly, his eyes dropping to the envelope. "I can do that." I didn't smile, didn't soften. I just looked at him and said, "Good." The hum pulsed in approval, and for once that was enough. The letter from Randall's attorney. I wasn't surprised when the letter arrived, though I was surprised it took so long. It came in a heavy white envelope with gold trim, the return address from a downtown firm known for its aggressive courtesy, the kind of people who smiled while sharpening their knives. I opened it at the kitchen table, the box on the mantel glowing faintly, the hum a steady rhythm in my chest. The letter was polite, its words carefully chosen, unfortunate discrepancy pending clarification, amicable resolution. It requested a consultation to align understanding and ended with a veiled threat. Our client hopes to avoid formal litigation, but reserves the right to pursue all legal remedies should discussion fail. I read it twice, the hum growing sharper, a melody that seemed to mock the letter's pretense. Somewhere deep in my chest, something stirred, not fear, but a memory, sharp and clear. I was 19 again, sitting in a crowded office with Derek signing our first mortgage papers, while a broker talked over me like I wasn't there. I hadn't spoken up then, just nodded and smiled. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I made tea, the ritual grounding me, and called Harold. He picked up on the second ring. "I was expecting your call," he said, his voice calm but alert. "You received Randall's letter," I said. "I did. I've drafted a response. It'll hold May. The law is on your side." "Will it delay things?" I asked, my fingers brushing the key in my pocket. He hesitated. "It might temporarily, but the will is unshakable." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Let me know what you need." "I've already filed a response," he said. "It'll be fine." I hung up the hum a quiet reassurance. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out Marlene's journal, its crescent moon cover warm under my fingers. I flipped to an entry I'd read before, written in her final months. "They'll fight May. They always do when they think they're owed. But the box is your shield. Open it when you're ready to stand alone." The words sent a shiver through me, the hum surging like a tide. I looked at the box, its glow brighter now, the vines seeming to shift in the dim light. I wanted to open it to see what Marlene had meant, but the hum held me back, a gentle warning that the time wasn't right. The second confrontation with Randall. 3 days later, Randall returned his knock sharp and certain like a demand. I opened the door to find him standing there, no windbreaker this time, just a sweater and jeans. His face a mask of calculated calm. The hum pulsed, a warning as I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. I didn't want his presence in my home, not now, not when the box and the hum were waking something in me I couldn't yet name. "I figured I'd try one last time," he said, his voice low, his eyes searching mine for weakness. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch the hum a steady rhythm. He shifted his hands, rubbing together against the cold. "I know you're angry," he said. "Do you?" I asked, my voice soft but sharp, the hum a quiet ally. He looked down, then up again, his eyes hard. "I've been thinking about what Trevor said, about what you said, about Marlene." I said nothing. The box's glow visible through the window, a faint crescent shadow dancing on the porch. "I know I handled things badly." He continued the word, careful, like a step on thin ice. Badly, I repeated the hum, mocking the word's inadequacy. What a small word for betrayal. His jaw clenched, but he pressed on. I was trying to protect the estate. I thought, you thought she didn't know her own mind. I cut in, stepping closer, the hum a surge of fire in my chest. You thought she couldn't possibly have made a decision without consulting you. She was slipping, Mom, he said, his voice rising. You know she was. She was, I said, my voice steady, unyielding. And she still had more clarity than you ever did. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his eyes darting to the window where the box's glow pulsed faintly. I stepped forward, the hum, a melody, now sharp and clear. I have nothing left to give you, I said, and I won't pretend to respect someone who tried to strip dignity from the dead just to get paid. You think I'm a monster? He asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. No, I said, quieter now, the hum softening. I think you're a boy who never learned how to lose. The words hit like a stone, and he didn't speak. He looked out at the yard, the dogwood tree's petals scattered across the steps like confetti. I used to admire you, I said, my voice steady, but not unkind, not because you were successful, but because you made things happen. You had drive, focus charm, but somewhere along the way you started believing you were owed. That anything outside your plan was a mistake to be corrected. He nodded, his eyes still on the yard. When Dad died, I was scared, he said, his voice barely audible. We all were. So what now, he asked. Looking at me, finally. You never speak to me again. I'm speaking now, I said, the hum a quiet pulse. But I'm not going to reward your behavior with comfort. He rubbed his hands together, the cold biting now. You're really going to leave it all to Claire? Some of it, I said. The rest goes to causes Marlene cared about, the library, the children's shelter places, that gave more than they took. He exhaled, a cloud of breath in the chilly air. Then I guess this is it. Yes, I said, and it was. He turned, walked down the steps, and got into his car. No yelling, no slamming, just a slow pull away from the curb. I stayed on the porch, the hum, a gentle melody, the box's glow, a quiet promise. The wind quieted, the light shifted, and I felt clean, not triumphant, but whole. The morning of the hearing, the air in my house felt charged, like the pause before a lightning strike. I stood in the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea, its steam curling upward like a question unanswered. The navy folder lay on the counter, its leather worn, but resolute, a testament to the promises Marlene and I had made. Beside it, the wooden box with its carved crescent moon and vines pulsed faintly, its glow a soft heartbeat in the dawn's gray light. The brass key, etched with a single crescent moon, rested in my pocket. Its warmth, a steady anchor against the storm I knew was coming. The hum beneath my skin, that strange melody that had grown stronger since the will reading, was no longer a whisper, but a song, clear and vibrant, weaving through my thoughts. It wasn't just Marlene's presence, though I felt her in every note. It was mine, a strength I'd buried under years of giving, now rising to meet the challenge ahead. Randall had made good on his threat, filing a legal challenge to the 2008 will, claiming Marlene's mind had been too frail to make such a decision. Trevor, to his credit, had stayed out of it, his silence a fragile bridge between us. But Randall's determination was a force I knew too well, and I was ready not with anger, but with a clarity that felt like fire. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy blazer and a cream blouse, colors that felt like armor. The box went into my bag, its weight a reminder of the secrets I hadn't yet uncovered. Marlene's journal, with its cryptic entries about the box and the women before us, stayed on the table. I'd read enough to know it held answers, but the hum told me to wait, to trust the timing. I slipped the key into my pocket, its crescent moon warm against my fingers, and headed to the courthouse, the hum, a steady companion guiding my steps. The courthouse, a stage for truth. The courthouse was a looming structure of gray stone, its columns cold and unyielding, its windows reflecting a sky heavy with clouds. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and old paper, a scent that carried the weight of countless battles fought and won. I walked through the metal detector, the box in my bag pulsing faintly as if aware of the stakes. The hum surged a melody that seemed to echo off the marble floors, sharpening my senses. Harold met me in the hallway, his gray suit crisp, his eyes sharp but kind. "You're early," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I don't like to keep truth waiting," I replied, my voice steady. The hum, a quiet ally. He nodded, gesturing toward a heavy oak door. "They're in there. Randall's lawyer is good, sharp, aggressive. But we're sharper. The will is ironclad, and we have the journal." The journal. I'd given him a copy of Marlene's entries, the ones written in her moments of clarity, detailing our decision to sign the mutual, will her trust in me, her awareness of her own mind. The originals stayed with me, tucked into the folder, their ink a lifeline to the sister who'd never wavered. We entered the courtroom, a cavernous space with high ceilings and rows of benches that smelled of wax and time. Randall sat at the plaintiff's table, his suit tailored, his posture rigid. His lawyer, a woman with sleek black hair and a smile like a blade, whispered something in his ear. He didn't look at me, but I felt his awareness a tension that hung in the air like static. Trevor was absent his absence, a statement I didn't yet know how to read. I took my seat beside Harold, the box in my bag, warm against my leg, the hum a steady rhythm in my chest. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, entered with a rustle of robes. Her nameplate read, Judge E. Hawthorne, and her presence commanded the room a quiet authority that reminded me of Marlene in her prime. The hearing began with formalities, names, and dates, read aloud, the air growing heavier with each word. Randall's lawyer, Ms. Carter, stood first, her voice smooth and precise. "Your Honor, we contend that the 2008 will presented by Mrs. Delacroix is invalid due to Marlene Delacroix's diminished capacity at the time of its execution. Medical records from 2007 indicate early cognitive decline, casting doubt on her ability to make such a decision." I felt the hum surge a sharp note of defiance. Harold leaned over, his voice low. "She's fishing. They have no proof." He stood, his tone calm but unyielding. "Your Honor, the 2008 will was executed with 2 witnesses and a notary, both of whom attested to Ms. Delacroix's clarity. We have a journal written in her hand detailing her intentions and her trust in her sister May Delacroix. The plaintiff's claim relies on speculation, not evidence." Judge Hawthorne's eyes flicked to me, then to Randall. "Proceed," she said, her voice a gavel in itself. Ms. Carter called a doctor, a neurologist who'd seen Marlene in 2007. He spoke of memory lapses, confusion, early signs of Alzheimer's. I listened. My hands folded, the hum a steady pulse. The doctor's words were true but incomplete. Marlene had fought her illness with a fierceness that no chart could capture. I remembered her laughter, her sharp quips, the way she'd squeezed my hand twice the day before she died. Once for hello, once for goodbye. Harold cross-examined, his questions precise. "Did Ms. Delacroix ever indicate during your consultations that she was unaware of her legal decisions?" "No." The doctor admitted, his eyes dropping to his notes. She was adamant about her independence. "And in June 2008, when the will was signed, did you have any reason to believe she lacked capacity?" The doctor hesitated. I didn't see her that month, but based on her condition, it's possible. Possible isn't proof. Harold cut in his voice, firm. Thank you. The doctor stepped down, and I felt the hum soften a quiet nod of approval. Harold called me to the stand, and I walked forward the box in my bag, pulsing faintly, the key warm in my pocket. I swore the oath, my voice steady, the hum a melody that seemed to fill the room. Mrs. Delacroix Harold began. Can you describe your relationship with your sister Marlene? I looked at the judge. Not Randall, my words clear. We were sisters, but more than that. We were each other's anchor. When she got sick, I cared for her not out of duty, but love. She trusted me to carry out her wishes, and I trusted her to know her own mind. And the will Harold asked, holding up the document. We signed it together in 2008, I said, my voice unwavering. She was clear, sharp herself. She wanted to protect what we'd built, to keep it from those who'd see it as a prize, not a promise. Ms. Carter stood her smile sharp. Mrs. Delacroix, isn't it true that you influenced your sister's decisions given her declining health? The hum surged a wave of fire in my chest. I met her eyes, my voice calm, but unyielding. Marlene didn't bend to anyone, not even her illness. If anything, she influenced me to be stronger, to see clearer. The will was her choice, not mine. She pressed her questions sharp, probing for weakness. Did I benefit financially from caring for Marlene? Did I pressure her to exclude others? I answered each one, the hum guiding my words steady and true. The box in my bag pulsed stronger, its glow a faint light through the fabric unnoticed by the room, but felt by me. Harold submitted the journal, reading excerpts aloud. Marlene's words filled the courtroom, her voice alive in the ink. May is my heart, my home. I trust her to keep what's ours safe. The judge listened, her eyes narrowing slightly, her pen pausing. Randall shifted in his seat, his face pale, his hands clenched. Ms. Carter tried one last angle, producing a later will dated last fall, naming Randall and Trevor as beneficiaries. This document, she said, reflects Ms. Delacroix's final wishes drafted when she was under the care of her nephews. Harold stood, his voice cutting through hers. Your Honor, the 2008 will is a mutual will, irrevocable, without the consent of both parties. No such consent exists. The later document is null. The judge raised a hand, silencing the room. I've heard enough, she said, her voice steady. The 2008 will stands. The plaintiff's challenge is dismissed. A murmur rippled through the room, soft but electric. Randall stood his chair, scraping his eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't look at me, didn't speak, just walked out, his lawyer trailing behind. The hum softened a gentle melody, now a quiet acknowledgement of the truth upheld. The box opens. I drove home, the box in my bag, warm against my leg. The hum, a steady pulse. The courtroom victory wasn't joy, it was relief. A weight lifted, a door closed. But another door was waiting, one I'd felt since the will reading, since the key's warmth, since the box's glow. In the living room, I set the box on the coffee table, its carved moons and vines shimmering in the afternoon light. The hum was a song, now clear and vibrant, urging me forward. I pulled the key from my pocket, its crescent moon gleaming, and fitted it into the lock. This time it turned, the click loud in the quiet house. The glow intensified, a soft golden light spilling from the seams, and the hum surged, filling my chest with a warmth I couldn't name. I opened the lid, my hands steady, despite the racing of my heart. Inside was no gold, no jewels, but a small velvet pouch and a letter in Marlene's handwriting sealed with a wax crescent moon. I opened the letter first, the hum, a melody that seemed to sing her words before I read them. May, if you're reading this, you've won. Not just the estate, but yourself. The box isn't just ours, it's hers, the women before us, the ones who carried the light. The pouch holds a seed not of a plant, but of strength. Plant it where we planted the dogwood. Trust it. Trust yourself. I opened the pouch, and a single seed no larger than a pea glowed faintly, its surface etched with a crescent moon. The hum surged a wave of warmth and clarity, and I knew what to do. I walked to the backyard, the dogwood tree's branches swaying in the evening breeze, its petals scattered like promises. I knelt, digging a small hole with my hands, and placed the seed inside, covering it with earth. The hum softened a gentle note, as if the earth itself sighed in relief. I stood the key still in my hand, the hum now a quiet presence, a companion rather than a guide. The box's glow faded, its purpose fulfilled, but I felt its power in me, a strength that wasn't just Marlene's or mine, but something older, shared, unbreakable. The aftermath. A quiet triumph. The days that followed were calm, a stillness that felt earned. Trevor called once, his voice soft, asking if he could visit. I said yes, but not yet. I needed time not to heal, but to settle into the woman I'd become. He didn't push, and I was grateful for that. Randall didn't call, didn't write. I saw his car once parked at the edge of town, but he didn't approach. I didn't expect him to. Some bridges burn slowly, others collapse in a single moment. Ours had crumbled in the courtroom, and I didn't mourn it. Claire came by the next week, her lemon squares in a tin, her smile bright but hesitant. I told her about the trust, about the portion of the estate I'd set aside for her. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears, not of greed, but gratitude. "You didn't have to," she said, her voice breaking. "I wanted to." I said, the hum, a quiet pulse, a reminder of the family I had chosen. We sat on the porch, the dogwood tree blooming despite the season, its petals brighter than they should have been. I didn't tell her about the seed, the box, the hum not yet. Some truths needed time to grow, like the tree, like me. The morning after the courtroom victory, I woke to a house that felt lighter, as if it had exhaled a breath it had held for years. The navy folder was tucked away in the safe. Its purpose served a quiet sentinel of the promises Marlene and I had kept. The wooden box, its carved crescent moons and vines, now still sat on the mantel, no longer glowing, but heavy with the truth it had revealed. The brass key, etched with a single crescent moon, rested in my pocket. Its warmth, a gentle reminder of the strength I'd claimed. The hum beneath my skin, that strange melody that had guided me through betrayal and battle, was softer now, a lullaby rather than a call to arms, as if it knew the storm had passed. I made tea, the ritual grounding me, the steam curling upward like a memory released. Outside, the dogwood tree stood defiant against the November chill, its pale pink blossoms brighter than they should have been, as if touched by something beyond the season. I thought of the seed I'd planted beneath its roots, the glowing crescent-etched gift from Marlene's box, and wondered what it would become. The hum pulsed faintly, a quiet assurance that time would tell. I walked to the backyard, my slippers damp in the dew, and stood by the tree. The earth where I'd buried the seed was undisturbed, but I felt a subtle warmth beneath my feet, a pulse that matched the hum in my chest. Marlene's words from her letter echoed in my mind. The seed isn't of a plant, but of strength. Plant it where we planted the dogwood. Trust it. Trust yourself. I didn't know what it meant, not fully, but I trusted it, as I trusted her, as I was learning to trust myself. The courtroom had been a battle, but this moment was a victory, not of law or money, but of being. I was May Delocqua, 62, a widow, a mother, a sister, but also a woman who had found her voice, her fire, her place. The hum was my song, now woven into my bones, a melody of resilience that no one could take. A visit from Claire. Claire came by that afternoon, her tin of lemon squares tucked under her arm, her smile bright but tentative, as if she sensed the weight of what had passed. I'd told her about the trust at her last visit, and she'd cried not for the money, but for the recognition, for the family we'd chosen in each other. Today, she hugged me tightly at the door, her warmth grounding me, the hum softening in her presence. "You look different," she said, setting the tin on the kitchen table, her eyes searching mine. Lighter, maybe. I smiled, the hum a gentle pulse. Maybe I am. We sat on the porch, the dogwood tree's blossoms scattering across the steps like soft promises. I poured tea, the cups clinking softly, and told her about the courtroom, about Randall's defeat, about Trevor's silence. I didn't mention the box or the seed, not yet. Some truths needed time to grow like the tree, like the strength I felt blooming inside me. "Aunt May," she said, her voice soft. "Why me? Why the trust?" I looked at her, her freckles catching the sunlight, her eyes clear with the kind of kindness that didn't ask for anything in return. "Because you see me," I said, "not as a mother or a sister or a means to an end. Just me. That's worth more than money." She blushed, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. "I didn't do anything special." "You did," I said, the hum pulsing in agreement. "You showed up. You stayed." We sat in silence, the wind carrying the scent of damp earth and dogwood blossoms. The hum was a quiet melody, now a song of peace, not struggle. I handed her a letter, not the one from Marlene, but one I'd written last night, sealed with a wax crescent moon I'd found in Marlene's things. "Don't open it now," I said. "When you need to remember who you are, read it." She nodded, tucking it into her bag, her eyes bright with questions she didn't ask. The hum approved, a gentle note that felt like Marlene's laughter, bright and wild. The seeds bloom. A week later, I noticed a change in the backyard. The dogwood tree, already an anomaly in November, seemed to glow, its blossoms fuller, their pink edges tinged with gold. Beneath it, where I'd planted the seed, a small sprout had emerged, its leaves etched with faint crescent moons, shimmering in the morning light. The hum surged a wave of warmth and clarity, and I knelt beside it, my fingers brushing the delicate leaves. They were warm, alive, pulsing with the same rhythm as the hum in my chest. I didn't know what it was, not a plant, not in any ordinary sense, but I felt its power, a legacy that stretched beyond Marlene, beyond me, to the women before us. Her journal had hinted at it. "The box is a door, May. Not to a place, but to you, to us." The sprout was a symbol, a reminder of the strength we carried, passed down through generations, waiting to be claimed. I sat by the tree, the journal open on my lap, and read the final entry written days before Marlene's death. "The seed is for you, May. For the girl who read under the stars, for the woman who carried me when I couldn't walk. Plant it, and you'll see. We're never alone." Tears pricked my eyes, not of sadness, but of recognition. The hum softened a lullaby now weaving through the branches above me. I thought of our mother, her quiet strength, our grandmother who'd walked through fire to protect her family, and Marlene who'd burned bright even as her mind faded. The seed, the box, the hum, they were theirs, and now they were mine. I stood the key warm in my pocket and looked at the sprout. It wasn't just a plant. It was a promise, a light that would grow as I had grown. The hum was part of me now, not just a guide, but a truth, a song of resilience that would carry me forward, a final reflection. The weeks that followed were quiet, but not empty. Trevor called again, asking to visit, and I agreed. He came on a Sunday, his boots off at the door, his eyes hesitant but clear. We talked not about the will or the estate, but about small things, the weather, his garage, the old swing set in the backyard. The hum was soft, watchful, as if giving him a chance to rebuild what he'd broken. I didn't forgive him, not yet, but I listened, and that was enough for now. Randall didn't reach out, and I didn't expect him to. His silence was a choice as mine had once been, and I let it be. The dogwood tree bloomed brighter, the sprout beneath it growing taller, its crescent-etched leaves a quiet miracle in the winter chill. I tended it daily, not with effort, but with care, a ritual that felt like honoring Marlene, myself, and the women before us. I wrote more letters, not just to Claire, but to the library, the children's shelter, the places Marlene had loved. I gave what I could not out of duty, but choice a way to keep her fire alive. The hum pulsed with each act, a melody of purpose that filled the house with light. One evening, as the sun set, casting golden streaks across the backyard, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, the dogwood tree glowing the sprout, a small beacon beneath it. I thought of the girl I'd been reading under the stars with Marlene, dreaming of a world that stretched beyond our small town. I thought of the woman I'd become, shaped by loss and love, betrayal and triumph. I thought of the seed, the box, the hum, a legacy of strength that wasn't just mine, but ours, shared across time. I spoke to the air, to Marlene, to the women before us. "I see you," I said, my voice soft but steady. "I'm here." The hum answered, a gentle note, a song of peace. I didn't need to shout or fight anymore. I was enough, and that was everything. A message to share. To anyone reading this, listening to this story, I want you to know something: you are enough. The world will try to tell you otherwise, to make you smaller, to silence your voice. It will come in the form of betrayal, of expectation, of chairs blocked by those who should love you most. But you have a light, a hum, a strength that no one can take unless you let them. I was 62 when I learned this, when I opened a box and planted a seed and found my voice. It's not too late for you either. Say what needs saying, set the boundaries you need to set, and don't apologize for choosing yourself. Share this story with someone who needs it, someone who's forgotten their own song. Let them know they're not alone. The dogwood tree blooms, the sprout grows, and I am at peace. Not because I won a battle, but because I found myself. And that I've learned is the truest victory.